Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shills, Dutch serfs, peasants, vassals, convenience, meat sacks. I'm Useful Idiot. Welcome. And wow, so the Heritage Foundation did an investigation, and they've discovered that every piece of legislation that Biden supposedly signed the last 4 years was done with an auto pen. And in fact, the only actual true signature that Biden put to anything was his letter announcing he was dropping out of the presidential race. So this is pretty stunning, but it confirms what a lot of us have been discussing, the whole fact that somebody else was running the government during the Biden administration for the entire 4 years. And this is a chilling development. And of course, there was the moment when Mike Rogers interacted with President Biden and asked him about a executive order he signed halting LNG exports. And Biden denied it vehemently, said he never signed anything even remotely like that. And so, as I mentioned, and I did a video about this, I think it's one of the most important questions of our time that's getting swept under the rug now. And that's who was running the United States government for 4 years when Biden was president. Of course, he was on vacation on over a third of his presidency. And now we find out that most of the legislation, if not all, passed under the Biden administration. He didn't actually sign. And so this has some legal problems, and I'll leave that up to legal experts to discuss what the implications are of the fact that all this legislation was signed by somebody besides the United States president, because there could be a lot of legal implications, although I'm sure in this day and age, nothing's going to happen. But we also have the story about the DNC fundraiser, Lindy Lee, declaring that Biden wasn't running anything and that it was low-level staff members, Jill Biden and Hunter Biden. So interesting that we're having people outraged by the fact that they say that Elon Musk is running the U.S. government now, when it looks like under Joe Biden, his staff, and of all people, Jill Biden and Hunter Biden may have been running the U.S. government. And it also explains, and I've speculated about this, it also explains why a lot of legislation that leaned to the very far left, including all this DEI stuff and the social engineering and the whole woke legislation that's so far left and so radical, and it wasn't even indicative of a lot of Biden's policies. There was a point 10 or 20 years ago where Biden thought that gay marriage was something that shouldn't be condoned. And of course, now he's all on board with it. But that aside, it does explain why a lot of legislation didn't really jibe with what Biden necessarily would have been supporting. I've talked about that before as well. I'm surprised that a lot of this legislation got through because it was pretty radical. And part of that as well is the whole idea of Biden pushing for student debt loan cancellation. And so it turns out he didn't even actually sign any of that. And the whole development of the whole idea of the auto pen is interesting. Apparently, it started in the 50s, and it was relatively benign, but there was actually a little bit of outrage in 2013 when President Barack Obama was on vacation in Hawaii, and this was the first time that they used the auto pen to sign a bill into law, an executive order, because he was in Hawaii at the time. And there was a lot of hubbub about that at the time. And yet now we have evidence that for 4 years, every piece of legislation that Joe Biden supposedly signed was signed with an auto pen. Let's remember that with the auto pen, it's a facsimile of the president's signature and is basically a rubber stamp. And anyone could use this auto pen to sign any legislation, and that's apparently what happened the last 4 years. So it goes back to my bottom line. Exactly who was running the government over the last 4 years? We know it wasn't Biden, and I personally would like to know who it was, because it tells us a lot about technocrats. It tells us a lot about the deep state, and it talks uh, to us a lot about a government running itself. All chilling things to consider. I'm East Lydia. Don't you be one too.